Perth Linux Users Group, talking Linux and open source.
So this talk is basically a thing I've been wanting to do for a while is like do a Homelab talk, and I've just always I don't know, I've wanted to do it, but just haven't for one reason or another. So yeah. So first question might be what a Homelab is. So Homelab's mainly running servers at home. Helps me learn new technologies, and other people also run a Homelab to run self-hosted services. But like a server can be a computer, or it can be like an enterprise rack like I have. So why a Homelab? There's a few reasons. I like working on enterprise hardware, like that would be used in a workplace like Dell, HP servers. I use mine mainly to store my media collection. I find it very rewarding, but it's also a lot of work. It's sometimes like a bit of a second job, in addition to a day job. But it also Homelab is probably the fastest way to gain experience with a lot of these technologies that you'd find in work if you work in an IT or software field. And there's not really any SLAs or like people who will get annoyed when services don't work, except maybe like one or two people I have that use my Jellyfin for movies and TV. Something I touched on, but what can you run on a Homelab? And mostly anything you can run on a computer. A lot of people use Plex and Jellyfin, which are media servers, to run self-hosted movies and TV. Then Navidrome, which is subsonic client, but it's like a music server, and Audiobook Shelf, which is like a self-hosted Audible. Hypervisors, VMware and Proxmox, containers, Kubernetes and Docker, storage, ZFS, Ceph, Cluster, and other distributed storage systems. So here we go, the part that's not as much for this audience, but I'll go through how IP addresses work a bit. So basically, different devices get assigned IP addresses, which let them connect to each other. And for this part, we need to understand, or in the demos that I'm going to do, that devices and IP addresses and which connect to each other use different ports for different protocols. And I'm going to go through some like web server stuff that I've set up. So DNS acts as a like phone book or address or record of an IP address mapped to a host name, so we don't have to write the whole IP address. We just have a DNS entry for like a particular server or website. And then there's also DNS servers, which are a bit separate, but we can have two separate DNS records that could point to the same server or IP address, or it could point to another one. There's lots of problems which are caused by DNS because it's kind of poor to lots of routing and internet and anything you set up. So let's go through NAS and RAID levels. So what is a NAS? NAS stands for Network Attached Storage. Normally boxes like Synology, which is shown, that have 4 disks. So if we have like 4 2-terabyte disks, we've got 8 terabytes in total. But because we have some form of redundancy set up on the NAS, we only have 4 terabytes of usable storage. And then there's different RAID levels, which gives you more or less redundancy to recover from. But you see here, RAID is not a backup. It's a way of making data more available and more redundant, but you should still back up your NAS, even though I don't, but yeah, you probably should. Then if these files are on this NAS here, how do we access them? We could plug in like a phone or a computer directly to it and copy it to a hard drive, but it's much easier to use shared file systems like SMB and NFS to access all these files on multiple different machines. So what is a hypervisor? So basically, a hypervisor lets us run multiple virtual machines on one computer operating system. There's two main types. Type 1, which is like a Linux powered thing, and there's no operating system in between the layer between the hypervisor and the hardware, so it can be a whole lot more performant. Types include VMware, Proxmox, and Hyper-V. And then type 2 would be where we still have an operating system, so you might run stuff on your laptop or your desktop with VMware Workstation or VirtualBox. Lots of the enterprise hypervisors have extra features like backup, high availability, and stuff. But at its core, for what we're going through, just lets us run virtual machines. So containerization. So one of the things I use is Docker, but there's other containers like Podman. And our container contains all dependencies for running like a web application or a Python project, which means we don't have to worry about manually getting the right dependencies on Linux or Windows or wherever we're running it. Our Docker container comes with everything already set up, then can be used for web applications, which I've already talked about. You get Docker containers and other containers as images, which you pull down from Docker Hub or your container registry, and pull them down and automatically update themselves. They're portable because by default, when you set up Docker in a Docker file, you don't by default with Docker you only have data on the container isn't kept if you restart it. So then you use a Docker file or a Docker Compose file to map environment variables and Docker volumes, which is a folder mapped outside of your container. Normally on your hard drive, you're running the Docker container on. So between restarts, you still keep data like databases, configuration files, and other data that you'd normally not have. And then good thing Docker does is it automatically starts itself on system restart if you set it up properly, which compared to like running the equivalent application with a systemd service, you sometimes have to, like previously before I was using Docker, I had to manually write the systemd service for these applications, even though it did work. But Docker is better for what I do. So VPN, there's two types of VPNs. Got your VPN services, which will be like you pay X amount of dollars a month and you can tunnel to another country. So you might use that to get around Netflix or other geo-blocks, and it's tunneling you to their servers. But the type of VPN I'll kind of go through is a site-to-site VPN like WireGuard or OpenVPN, which lets me connect back to my home or so I appear to be on my same local network. So reverse proxies. So reverse proxy lets us publicly expose web applications on port 443 instead of port 80, which is HTTP, which isn't as secure. As we see here, we can, in this example, they've used different web servers and running on different machines, but I have my Nginx reverse proxying application of the same machine, as well as applications on other VMs that I'm running. I have mine set up with a wildcard certificate, which gives me valid SSL certificates on local DNS. So that's really good and took me quite a long time, weirdly, to set that up. But I finally realized, just worked it out a while ago, and it's been working well since then. I also have unique domain names for every service. So because my parents got me a domain called jaspergreenhill.com years and years ago, before the internet was as big. So I now have a domain which I haven't used for years, but when I started self-hosting stuff, it means I can set up stuff on my domain through Cloudflare, and I'll go through some of that stuff next. So here's some hardware I have at home. So this is where I talk about a bunch of network issues that I've had recently, which wasn't in the original talk. As you can see, this used to be an unmanaged switch, but now it looks like this, which we got rid of. We can see we've removed one switch and added another switch. So last week, this is my networky stuff, and then I go through the rest of my Homelab. But basically, last week I had digital interviews and Teams kept freezing. So I was like, why is Teams freezing? And I did some tests. Like with my dad, who still has access to Teams. And whenever I do a speed test, it would break the Teams connection and it wouldn't work out, recover. So I discovered, I did some network troubleshooting and fixed some stuff on my end. Firewall, which is like my router, is running on pfSense, which is an open source firewall. That is connected on top of a rack, but that was only had a 100 megabit LAN connection, and then my WAN connection was gigabit, which was fine. So I shouldn't have had problems with the network, right? So what I did is I migrated the pfSense physical firewall to a VM running on the third Proxmox node, and then I did stuff with that. Then they all have gigabit interfaces, but I wasn't getting gigabit speeds. So I was like, why am I not getting gigabit speeds? So the next thing I did is I replaced this switch, first with a Cisco 2960, which had 2 gigabit ports. And I was like, why am I still not getting gigabit speeds? So then I replaced the switch with a full gigabit switch in a Cisco switch. Some of these things are different things I had to do anyway and wanted to do. So yeah. Then I had gigabit speeds on all ports. So we know we had gigabit speeds on all ports. And then I tested all the cables and worked on my local network, and I was getting gigabit speeds between 2 devices connected. And then I did a bunch of network performance tests, and I was still getting 100 megabit speeds on my WAN. So this morning, I took to my ISP, and I pay for 1,050, but for the past 2 years, they have only been giving me 140, which isn't really good. So hopefully they get back to me and I get a refund. So isn't networking fun? Anyway, 40 megabit uplink, which is pretty good, but I was paying for 50, and yeah. So before we move through all that, what is all this? So switch I've already talked about a bit. That's Cisco 3850, which I am set up in an unmanaged mode. It's a managed switch in an unmanaged mode for now, and then I'll eventually set up VLANs and stuff. That's a middle picture. I don't know how. Can I put a pointer on the screen? Let's see if I can. I'm sure I can, but oh yeah. So that's one. Oh, here we go. There we go. That's better. So that's my Cisco switch I'm talking about. That's an unmanaged switch in running gigabit switch in like unmanaged mode, but it can do VLANs and it's a layer 3 switch, so I'm going to set that up eventually. Then these 2 Proxmox nodes are set up with LSI mode cards, and they're like something I'm going to set up at some point. This thing is a like an Intel chassis. It's really loud in summer, and where I have my server rack, it's upstairs, so it gets very humid, gets very hot. Doesn't have ventilation, but haven't had any much problem so far. But this in summer sounds like a jet engine. So I moved the drives into this like old desktop, which has 10 drive bays and has like 34 terabytes of storage. Then we've got these Proxmox nodes, which are hypervisor. That's also a Proxmox node. These are just old optiplexes. And then there's another Dell mini PC. And these have like i7 4770 roughly. Yeah. No. No, it's not IKEA. Oh, that's an IKEA rack, but this isn't an IKEA rack. I paid way too much money than I should have for this server rack. But yeah, I have. It was kind of like an IKEA thing that was up there anyway, and then this mess is just misc stuff. Like another one of these optiplexes, my old modem, like an old NAS, just cables I'm putting there. So because we're gonna I'm just gonna go to here and then get the diagram, because as we can see, you can't really read what it says, can we? So what I'm gonna do is go fair box. Okay, there we go. But I don't think I'm sharing that, am I? I am? Okay. So let's see if I can easily go through this. Unfortunately, to get this image working, I can't really easily embed it into the slides because of the resolution of how I've done it. Anyway, so Mac Mini, which I've now replaced, which isn't current, but it's still running pfSense, and my OpenVPN, which lets me connect back to home. It's Suricata, but it's not really set up or doing anything, but it's there. Cloudflare, I have a free Cloudflare account, and I have multiple services publicly exposed through that. And Cloudflare, well, they could sniff my traffic. They do a lot of things with web application firewalls and blocking bots and stuff at their edge because you proxy through them, which had a lot of security convenience that you'd otherwise have to do yourself. Then this is my seed box, which is like 45 terabytes of upload per month and 5 terabytes of storage for downloads. Then we've got my NAS, which is running on our gaming PC. This number isn't right because I've had to downsize it when I switch from like a 12 disc like chassis down back to my PC. It's more like 34 terabytes with 34 terabytes usable with like 70 total, something like that. It's got only 2 terabytes left, so yeah. I'm running like probably way under the recommendations for ZFS, but I haven't had many problems yet, so that's working fine. Then this is my access point, which is running just Wi-Fi, running OpenWRT, which is using DHCP for its pfSense, so that's all good. My R710, which is a Proxmox node, because I have high availability across the Proxmox cluster, the VMs which are on different hosts aren't accurate because HA will like move them around as they're needed as nodes go up and down. The other kind of problem with, I think at one point, my LAN was 100 megabits only through this, and a problem caused by that was if you have VMs running on shared storage over the network, they would quite often get really bad IO errors and just freeze. So I thought ages ago, I thought it was like, so I moved this Jellyfin, this media VM, which runs a bunch of stuff, like Jellyfin, a media server, Jellyseer, which is a request system for Jellyfin, to Ombi, which I'm not using anymore, but it was a similar type of thing for this. Sonar, Radar, Prowler, Lidar, which are like for downloading movies, TV shows, and movies. 2 different reverse proxies. So there's one that's for internal DNS, and then there's one for anything I've publicly exposed. And then I have firewall rules on here, so I'm only allowing things coming from Cloudflare to come in. And then I need to set this up again because I'm running out of space. And this is like a headless FFmpeg, which will transcode video files down to like smaller sizes if you want to do it to HEPEC, or change the codecs of your library from like H.264 to H.265 or whatever for better codec support. Transmission is not being run anymore. This is not being run anymore because my seed box has faster speeds because internet and upload speeds in Australia is shit. and not great. Unpacker, which some torrents are archived in archives, so you have to extract them, and this automates that. Reader, that's another like audiobook downloader, like these, but the code base has really not been maintained and is kind of on life support and isn't really being updated and doesn't do a good as job as all these other R's, unfortunately. Then audiobook shelf, which I have externally accessible to do audiobooks, and it works pretty well. Like in terms of streaming for Jellyfin and this, it works pretty well over the reverse proxy, even though it's going through Cloudflare. That's a YouTube downloader, which it didn't say in the README, but it's meant to be only run for like a small amount of media, so it's not as useful as it could be to fill my music library in Lidar. This is an IRC client, which I set up for something else, but I don't really use that much. It was just for testing IRC for something that's not listed here called AutoBurr, which will automatically grab torrents from private trackers that announce via IRC, so you can get the first early swarm and get lots of upload. Then Navidrone, which I've already mentioned. Yeah? I can't really, hang on. I can, hang on. Hang on. It's fine. Yeah, let's just see. Hang on. I can just auto zoom. Sorry, I haven't. Oh, really? I wonder how to do this. I don't think I can. I might. Yes, shared storage. This is there's an NFS share for VMs. There's an NFS share for VMs, and they're running off that. And they're accessible on all these nodes and mapped. And then there's an SMB share for VM backups, separate from that. But it's all on this storage. This node I do. I eventually want to set up Ceph on the other Proxmox node, so it's going to be better because you run into the problem when if you have a power outage or anything happens with this, all the VMs are like in a really dead state for a while, which is why I moved some of the stuff to running off local storage on this node and this disks because it's a bit more reliable IO wise and latency wise, general. I haven't set up Ceph, so yeah. Yes, I discovered that the hard way. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but this was before I fixed the bottlenecks in my network. Like this past week. I think this keeps coming out. So, then where was we? So Snapcast and Mopedy, and all that. So Mopedy is a music server. It runs an MPD server. It basically lets you. It does a lot of different things, but I use it to access. Hang on, we could see it before. I showed you before we were presenting how at the bottom of my screen it showed the music I was listening to. That is which I use in NCMPCPP. Yes, pronounce that correctly. And that's using Mopedy, running at home. And then these are the extensions I have installed. The good thing about Mopedy is it lets you use music from in your terminal or in a web client, which is Iris, which is like a web UI. And it has different, it's like an MPE server, but it lets you use music from Spotify, some FM, Jellyfin, which I run. But it supports a lot of different cloud music stuff. I don't think it has Apple Music, but it has like Tidal and Deezer and Internet Archive and Apple Podcasts and a bunch of stuff. Then I also have a thing called Snapcast set up, which is like a Sonos alternative or like Alexa media player alternative, which will sync the audio source between multiple different devices. This isn't. You can run it in a Docker, but you have to then manually muck around with updating the. Most of the things are Docker except for this, and I think Minecraft server is Docker as well. Mopedy isn't, because I need to be able to easily update the Python stuff, even though I could do it in Docker. And then it took me a while to fix Spotify's authentication changes, which needed to be fixed upstream. And then I spent like several weeks reading the issues, trying to work out why my account wasn't logging in. And it ended up being, it gave you a really cryptic like authentication message, but it just turned out to be a permission problem, which was very annoying. But Spotify broke it a while ago by deprecating the web API. Then they broke it again, which affect all like MPD, LibreSpot is the upstream, but the any Spotify client like for Linux, which is the terminal, was all broken because of this until they fixed it. But it's working now, so that's good. Then basically I did most of this, and then I added Nextcloud and a bunch of other stuff, which I'm kind of mentioning. So I'm running Nextcloud because I ran out of Google Drive storage, and I needed to move my photos somewhere, so they kept being backed up. So I just decided to self-host it. The process to get the photos out of Google Drive was not straightforward at all. There was a script I had to run to get the albums to work, to put Google give them in like JSON and like make it hard as possible for you to migrate this stuff. But you run a script against the Google Photos, which tidies them up. And then I couldn't get the albums to work through the tools that I found, but I just got the importer to put them in folders and then had to manually go through and add them and create my Nextcloud albums. It took a while, but it wasn't that painful. Then I've got netboot.xyz, which is a netboot, a Linux netboot tool, which basically it pulls like network installs from all these distributions. You can install Windows if you have a provision, like a Windows deployment server set up at home. You can like netboot basically any Linux distribution, Unix, FreeBSD, tools like recovery tools like dban and all this other stuff. It's been very useful. I mainly use it for testing hardware, but it's also useful if I have a problem, like my Arch install breaks for some reason and I need to reinstall it, or like fix a partition or something. I used it to resize and clone a drive when I had to resize a partition. So yeah, it's useful to being able to netboot stuff. And then Home Assistant I have running, which is it's accessible externally because that's a requirement to set up Alexa media player and a lot of the IoT devices which use APIs and their things are accessible on the internet, so they have to access your Home Assistant instance over something that's reverse proxied externally. But currently I just use it for power monitoring for my server rack, which all this connects to your smart plug. And I've got like the voltages, the power usage, how much watts it's using, what's monthly, weekly, all this stuff. There's some Windows stuff, like that's a member server, there's a domain controller here and a certificate authority. They were kind of like something I started and then didn't get all the way through setting up. So they're in various stages of progress, but they're kind of there, which I'll come back to later. This is a Minecraft server I set up for my brother and then he never used, which was a bit annoying. He's like, can you set it up for me and my girlfriend? And I'm like, sure, I can set it up. And I set it up, and it fixed a bunch of my network problems. I had issues with NAT and route and DNS not resolving. It turned out to be a NAT issue, which setting up this helped me fix. So that was good. But like the VM is currently in a really bad state because of network drops, and but it has been working well. and that's proxied through Cloudflare, and it's pretty good considering I'm running it through over the internet. Yeah, and then these are this one here, this one, and that one. They're like pen testing stuff I was playing with, but they're turned off currently. Ansible automation, which is kind of I set it up and then didn't do much else with it. It's kind of just sitting there for me to actively use. This thing keeps falling off. So yeah, syslog server, which isn't on currently, but I did have it set up to forward logs from pfSense and TrueNAS just because they were easier to set up than doing it on Linux. And I didn't properly get around to that. But that's mostly it. Let's just go back to our presentation, which is on Workspace ONE. So services, I've already talked about some of this stuff. I was going to do reverse proxy demos, but I might not do that. I don't think I'll do that this time. So things that are broken and I had to fix. So one major thing was my Homelab getting attacked by bots on the internet and taking all my services offline. So that wasn't fun. I had a insecurely exposed with port 80 forwarded to the internet. Not good idea, obviously. And came through that and took down Sonar, Radar, Jellyfin, and just wrecked everything. I then had to wipe everything that I was running it on before and basically redo everything. I didn't wipe my storage, but everything else got wiped and reset on Proxmox. Like I was previously running everything on like just a desktop, and I had like just Linux and just ZFS. So it let me separate out things, and Proxmox has backups. So which has helped when I've accidentally removed all my VMs on all my Proxmox clusters, and I had backups and I restored it and it was back up in the next day. So that was good. Virtualized router, which I mentioned, I went back to that. Why did I go back to that when it didn't work before? Again, it's the shared storage, the network thing. There was a network drop. The pfSense VM was in a really bad state over NFS, so it was errored. I couldn't access the hypervisor. But looking back, I don't know why I wasn't able to access the hypervisor. I think, I could have probably, but I was also panicking and I got home late at night and I was trying to fix it. So there's that as well. So one annoying thing that pfSense did recently, not recently, but like in the last few years, is they put a thing on their when you log into your pfSense router, it's like, we have deprecated the ISC DHCP. You should switch to key DHCP. And I was like, yeah, sure, that looks like a good idea. No, because key DHCP was not implemented and didn't have all the features the previous one had. And then I spent a weekend with me and my housemate trying to fix it all. So yeah. And the fun thing is if you switched to this DHCP, it would break, like the only way to get back was restore a backup, which luckily I had. So yeah. And then I did some reading on Reddit and found the people who push that to production, as in corporate environment production, and they had the same issues. So the messaging around the deprecation notice was not great, even though there was a blog post. But you found all his Reddit when I hit it, everyone else hit it at the same time. So it still says there's So before I switch to that, make sure it's feature complete. Really, some things we want to fix and make better. Layer 3 switch, I've already mentioned. Single point of failure being Proxmox and the network, which I've partly fixed by moving my firewall to shared to like a hypervisor with gigabit interfaces. But I still really want to get the storage in a Ceph setup or something with distributed storage, so I can take a node offline for maintenance and the storage keeps working. Because that's one of my pain points with my current setup is if the network goes out, the storage goes offline. The other idea is to set up Ceph, so each node or local ZFS with replication. So if I have a power outage, everything boots, they start up properly and don't have the storage not be up. And I have to manually fix them. No 10 gig. I had a 10 gig switch that I got from a previous workplace, tested it, and it's dead, unfortunately. So I had already spent $200 on 10 gig and fiber, but that's kind of my fault. But I'm probably going to eventually just direct connect Proxmox nodes so I can have cluster something to do with having live migration and directly connected fast Ceph storage, which is also recommended because you don't have a single point of failure being a switch, and you can direct connect the hypervisors to each other without going through a switch. Even though I now have that switch that I showed you guys all has 10 gig interfaces, so I may or may not go that way. There's like things like LDAP, Active Directory, which I'd like to set up with applications that support it. Monitoring would be good, particularly for all these network issues I've recently run into. And then like a good place if you want to get started is like a Homelab. The Homelab subreddit has helped me a few times where like if I run into issues, I just ask there. And as long as you're not silly and don't word your questions properly, it's just a asking for help thing if you want to make it easy for people to help you. Then I didn't mention this, but I have a wiki with all this documented with reasonably, not everything's documented, some things are documented. So wiki.jaspergreenhill.com can be accessed. It's just stuff I've set up basically. And there's some pages if people want to read. But yeah, that's about it. If people have questions, this is a lot, but yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing I didn't mention is once I set up layer 3, I'm gonna Ansiblize almost everything and have per application virtual machines for everything because yeah, there's jellyfin problems I've had and the CPU usage of one application impacting another, particularly for like network stuff. Which again, network changes I've made have fixed this a bit, but having separate VMs per application means you can easily migrate things or clone things or migrate things to layer 3 easily if they're without impacting other things on a VM. But yeah, what was your stuff you were saying? Yeah. Not really. It's central authentication in the sense that all the application, like web applications that support LDAP, will use the same credentials. I'm probably going to use Ansible to set it up on Linux because doing it manually would be a pain. On 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 10 different machines, including my laptops and computers and other things. But yeah. Central authentication, you set up Active Directory, you set up the LDAP, you'd set it up with pfSense has a Proxmox has a config for it, but then otherwise I'm probably going to just use Ansible to push out the LDAP config to all the Linux stuff. The same with logging and other things, but yeah, that's on the list. So yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can show you what I mean in a second. Let's just Control F. Hang on. What is this? I'm gonna do that. Okay. So, if we just close one of these. Oh yeah, I can do that. Hang on. I can do that. Hang on. Let me just. It's Shift. There we go. Woo! How's that work? The only reason I can access my Proxmox is because I have a VPN connection out of the Network Manager. But if we look here, that's my VM that runs all this stuff. It's running on that server that R7 Dell server that I showed you before. But I'm in capitals, so we don't want that. Because I'm using. I might make this. Minus. Is that actually going smaller? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So we can see that this is a VM. I'm running it on that machine, but this is my Docker containers running on. I have Docker installed on here, and I'm running the containers in this VM. You could run these on a separate machine, or a Linux container, but I'm not doing it that way. So was your question more confused about how it works, or? Yeah. Yes. Like you look at HTOP and hang on, let's just do the process like command prompt for like task manager for Windows, and we can see that like that's using a lot. I know that Jellyfin has had major problems with downloading memory usage and all that. And then when I was troubleshooting it, I'd stop Jellyfin and then I'd start it again, and then my audiobook shelf would like lag when it was trying to buffer. But it could be other things. I haven't really tested it that much, but as much as I could. But yeah. So you can see like this is Sonar, this is Lidar. They're still running. You can see Docker PS will show you the PID, so then you could check that in HTOP. Then yeah. Sorry, I'm not explaining it the best, but it's not virtual machines. Yeah. No, Portainer, I don't want to use Portainer. Portainer is something a lot of people use. I have no need to use Portainer because I manage everything through the command line, and I don't need Portainer. So yeah, instead of using Portainer, you just do Docker PS, Vim, Docker. Hang on. Yeah, and there's my file. Then you edit it there, and then you Docker compose up -d. Yeah, these are all how I have this all set up. But it's just one file to set up everything. This, okay. Oh yeah. Let's make this one. And there are some containers and there are some VMs. So the VM side, the summary using. If we go to summary, there we go. That's better. But then we have graphs of that stuff. That network traffic, disk I/O, memory usage. The memory usage, yeah, doesn't matter too much because like pfSense and Jellyfin it'll show high memory usage, but on the VM it's not actually high memory usage. It's just allocated there, so it's not as big of an issue. So yeah, it's a bit confusing. Like when I first looked at Docker, it was very like another language to me, but now I use it and it's fine. But getting the understanding of container and a virtual machine being a bit different is yeah. One virtual machine, yeah. 103, yeah. Yeah. Well, The ports are in container. No, because this isn't a virtual machine in your regular, as I kind of explained. It's not a virtual machine like you'd run on a laptop with VirtualBox. It's not only running on this machine. It's running on a hypervisor on a different server on a different computer. It's running bare metal. So if this might help you a bit to understand, but yeah, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to split this. That's the console of my host. So if I go SS, we don't have capitals. Root at PVE. Because I'm on VPN, we will need to do. Because DNS. No, it's the Well, on pfSense in the DNS section, you can have it as local domain. It's a bit confusing, but yeah, I probably shouldn't have done it that way. But yeah, it's for FQDN. But yeah, so if we go HTOP, we can see, not like that, we can't, but we can see these are the VMs running. So user bin KVM, and these are QEMU processes, which are running on here. And we can see these VMs, but we don't want to manage it in here. We want to manage it in the web UI. And then the containers are running on this VM. But the way I like to explain it is don't think of a hypervisor as a hypervisor, even though it technically is. The VMs are more like separate servers because in terms of performance, they're the same. You connect them through SSH, you connect through a Windows one with Remote Desktop Protocol. It's kind of the same, but kind of different. Yeah. Any more questions you had? Question, Nick? Yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I haven't seen this before, so. Oh, like that, yeah. Actually, that I didn't actually know about that, so thank you. Well, yeah, sort of. I don't really like Portainer or any of those things that simplify things because it's personal preference. But yeah, there's but yeah. Want to use. People run Jellyfin and Sonar and Radar on Windows, which I think is a really bad idea. But hey, to each their own. I haven't, but no, I don't know. I haven't done stuff with Podman, but I do know lots of people don't like Docker, so they use Podman. Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does, yeah. Yeah. You don't. Docker doesn't have to run as well. Daemon probably runs as root, but in terms of a user managing it, it doesn't have to be root or sudo. But yeah, it runs as root. Security concerns aside, but yeah, Docker's popular. I don't think so. I don't know. There isn't? Okay. But I don't know. I think I briefly looked at it, but not extensively. I think Podman support isn't as good as Docker, but it might be about the same. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Like Jellyfin and the popular projects will have Podman containers. So yeah. Jellyfin and a lot of popular projects will have Docker or Podman. So yeah. Yeah. Is it? Okay. Okay. Anyone else? I didn't even practice for this when I did this, so it's pretty good. I did practice before Genghis Khan and a lot, but yeah, I'm doing great. Should have told you. Yeah. 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 Proxmox uses QEMU. Oh, sorry. What? Sorry. What do you want me to do? Oh yeah. The question was, am I using QEMU on Proxmox? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, Proxmox just connects to my switch. The hypervisor connects to my switch. Let me just show you how I've done networking. A good way to do this is I am using bridged interfaces in. Let me go to network. Show you. Make this bigger. I don't know. Okay. So these are things I set up for testing, but it's not important. More stuff of my networking troubleshooting I've been doing. So this is my LAN interface. I've got a static IP address. This is important when I'm running a pfSense firewall, because without a static IP address, the pfSense VM goes down, you lose access to your internet. You still lose access to your internet, but you can access the local address to restart it. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a lot simpler, but there's two ways you can run pfSense in a VM. The first way is with their high availability in pfSense. The catch there is you need to be able to get two different WAN IP addresses. So you have to either pay your ISP for static IP addresses or do another thing with a switch. But I saw a video on how to do this. But basically what I'm doing is I have a dumb switch which is connected to my WAN ports. That's currently connected to just one machine, but I could connect it to multiple machines. And as long as these network interfaces here, so we have VMBR0 and VMBR1, which is my WAN, which I don't have any config on because it's my WAN. As long as those interfaces are the same on every host, when the high availability kicks in, it will work and restart itself. The guy who did it is really Digital Spaceport is like amazing. He runs a data center out of his home. It's pretty amazing stuff. But yeah. Yeah, I can show you when we're looking for that. We go hardware, network device. So these are that, but I can VMBR0 and VMBR1. Let me just show you it in. Work. What do you mean server not found? This is working, right? Yeah, okay. I might have to just go pfSense. Okay, sorry. 168.1.1. It's no, it's not. Okay, that's odd. It works at home with that DNS entrance, but not here. Okay, so if we go to interfaces, assignments, we have VTnet1 and VTnet0. That's my WAN and that's my LAN, and that's, yeah. I had put off the migration to the hypervisor because I was just like, oh, it's simpler to run it on real hardware. But I didn't have, I think I had a device, but in terms of like, I had these machines that had gigabit Ethernet ports, so I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll do this. Yeah. It wasn't as complicated to set up as I thought it would be. I basically just took the config from this, imported it, then I had the problem with conflicting IP addresses, and then I had to reinstall the whole thing. So because it was 1.1 and the install will set it up as 192.168.1.1, when you restored it, it was like, this ARP, these IP addresses is already in use on another device on your network. So then I had to like manually edit the config and just like replace 1.1 with 1.3 or something, and then it was able to import, and I was able to set it up. So yeah, virtual firewall is kind of tricky, but the guy who I watched the demo on, he has it running on his big nodes and then his like really small Raspberry Pis. So like he can take stuff down and he'll still have a small low power device to run firewall. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is, I guess. I don't, yeah, I'm running this thing, yeah, when I set up a 2960, I'm like, I only have one port, so I'm gonna, 1 gigabit port, so it's actually useful to do it this way, but yeah. This networking stuff I've been troubleshooting has been a real pain, and it was my ISP in the end, nothing in my setup, but ouch, anyway. So yeah, anyone else have more questions? No? Yes? No? Okay. Thank you. Sorry.